your host, Raphael Harry here. In this episode, we play back some of the best moments from some of our women guests in celebration of Women's History Month. And if you enjoy a particular segment, go and check out the full episodes featuring these wonderful and inspiring ladies. Thanks so much for listening, and it's a privilege of your company. This snippet is from episode 48 featuring Gali Gonzalez.
So I didn't grow up in the city. I actually grew up in a kibbutz. It's a socialist, um, I guess, agricultural commune. Doesn't necessarily have to be an agriculture, but it is. It does share. It's everything is about socialism. Everything is about sharing everything. I even until age 3, when they actually stopped this, I was living in a children home, so that's where I slept.
Wow.
My brothers were they're older than me, so they obviously remember more than I do of the children home. And so we all grew up with other kids, and they were kind of like our brothers and sisters. We're still very good friends with them, even though we moved away. So it was a completely different environment than Andres. But my memory was more when I remember, and of course there's a ton of memories, so it takes a lot to just
Yeah.
boil it down to one, but one that
If
is.
you have two, you can do two.
I think one was when my grandmother would come visit us. She actually lived in Tel Aviv, so she lived in the city, and so she could take just a bus to the kibbutz where we were, and get there. So sometimes she'll come. I wouldn't even know that she's supposed to come, and I would come back from school, and I would go, and she'll be there in the kitchen, like making these amazing Yemenite cookies, and I'm just like, oh my god, I'm so excited. There's gonna be cookies, and my grandma is here, and that means good food. And it's just it was always great to just be coming home and seeing her there on the kitchen table, just working the dough, and just the smell of the cardamom, and everything about it was just it just stuck in my memory.
Yeah, the aroma of love.
It's
was-
the
was
aroma
there.
of love, yeah. So yeah, and I mean, now that I'm older, I knew that sometimes she would come there because she was just tired of my grandpa. um but also for us in my culture, the mother will always be there to help with the kids of her kids.
Oh.
So even my mom is here now helping us, now that it's a little bit safer for her to travel.
Yeah.
She came here to help us a little bit with the kids because it's been stressful with the pandemic. But yeah, it's just that role of the mother and the grandmother. So my memory was just having my grandmother there, just baking, being there with us. It was great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's making me feel hungry already.
Me too.
Should have brought some cookies.
This is from episode 50 featuring Verena Thuna. So, why is it so important to, the differentiate between Northerners and Southerners?
Well, so one thing is soccer, right? Like you usually
Football
either
on this show. Football.
yeah, football. Because if you
It's
are
football.
supporting a northerner team, then you usually don't also support a southern team, right? Like you will find very few people who support like BVB and Bayern at the same time. And if you do know someone, then you have to seriously question them, I think, how that happened.
That's true. I don't think I've ever met anyone who supports BVB, which is Borussia Dortmund for for regular Americans, and I've never seen anyone supporting Borussia and Bayern except on the continental scene. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the Northerners tend to pride themselves and not having as as much of an accent, I guess. Like the further south you go, the more people hear speaking with more of an accent, like a local or regional accent. We do have that in the north, but I guess like people want to think that we don't. When you come from the north, you want to think that you don't have that. So at least that's yeah,
Oh, interesting.
where I grew up.
Interesting. So, with that being said, what do you consider your favorite childhood memory?
So that's kind of hard. I have a lot of good childhood memories.
Oh, you can throw two in there.
Like even that would still be hard, right? So I'm just gonna make a more of a broader statement. So even though I maybe was complaining when I was a child and always going on holiday somewhere where we would drive to, like the Netherlands or like Denmark, we would like go camping a lot when I was little. And I'm sure I was complaining at the time, right? But now I look back at that really favorably. And another thing is when I was growing up, sometimes we didn't go on vacation during the summer. And so instead, my parents bought me like a season ticket for the local pool. And I would just go off and be at the pool every day. Now that I don't have the possibility or the ability to do that, like that's another really like great childhood memory that I have.
This segment is from episode 51, featuring Graciela Tiscarano Sato.
I'll tell you one of my favorite childhood memories. We had the house that they bought, like the first time they ever bought a house. It was in Evans, Colorado. And so, imagine your typical tract housing, right? So you've
Yep.
got a street with all these houses that look the same and they're like, one level and a basement. And so we actually bought a house, Raphael, on the 3rd street of this development, which was going to be like, 20 streets. So we got in pretty early. And one of my favorite memories is for years watching all these houses get built on the next block and the next block and the next block, and visiting the construction site with my siblings after the construction workers went home. And we're like,
Ah.
"Ooh, here's a pile of wood." And so we would drag this wood home, like, "Hey, puppy, check it out." And I have these 2x4s and they're like 4 feet long. And we'd find, plywood, and we would, it's just a junk pile. So we
Yeah.
just take it with us. And the reason I'm remembering this with your question is because we ended up just building things like, well, let's make a little tiny picnic table, like a kid-sized picnic table, or a little footstool, or we'll use the wood to make a planter for your mom for the tomatoes. And so we have this unlimited supply of construction materials. And so my childhood was nails, hammers, learning to use a saw, and like really just building. We built a little candy store. My dad even built a candy store so my sister and I could start selling candy out of our driveway.
Wow.
So we did entrepreneurship very
Yeah.
early. We learned to go buy Tootsie Rolls for 2 cents and sell them for a nickel. And so we literally, we built with all this lumber a little candy store. And I remember my dad it was blue. My dad painted Selena and Grace's candy store. And it was like, Charlie Brown, the cartoon with the, psychology help, 5 cents. It would look like that. And so that's a really cool memory of just always building things and being creative and what could we make with this stuff, right? And then also, how that became a little storefront so that we could, buy some candy and make some profit and bring candy to the neighborhood. So all of that was wrapped up in that early constructed neighborhood that provided us hours of fun and creativity. And the room went quiet, like, oh, damn. Because now the colonel has to say in front of everybody, Lieutenant Tiscarino, I can't assign you that aircraft because, the law, women are not allowed in combat airplanes. I mean, he had to say it, right? Everybody had to hear it. And then I said, yes, sir, I understand. I just want everybody to know that I qualified for that, because that's what I do. I want to make sure it gets said. And then I said, I'll take the KC-135 refueling tanker. And that's how I ended up in the tankers. And then we watched the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th person behind me all get their fighter jet assignments.
Wow.
So that's the not so much discrimination as it was that I legally was not able to get assigned to go there, right?
Hmm.
But then 2 years
But
later, here I
how did
am.
that feel like at that moment to you?
How did I feel?
Yeah, at that moment.
I, I felt I felt like the airplane doesn't care about your gender, your sex at all. The
Hmm.
airplane really doesn't care. Those are artificial barriers put there by dudes to keep us out, and the guys are all just telling themselves that only they can do it. Right?
Yeah.
That was really obvious to me because, um, it just was. And, remember, I had a female pilot at pilot training. So I already knew that she was flying not only that airplane, but she was also flying the T-38, which is basically like an F-5, another fighter. She was already flying supersonic jets. So it wasn't that women couldn't, it was that Congress, representing the paternalistic views of American society, didn't want to see their women in combat, even though guess what? We were already there,
That's
right?
right.
But let's just make it official. And
Hmm.
so, you suck it up and you go do the assignment that you get. But then the real shock happened over Iraq after Desert Storm, and then it was Operation Southern Watch. So we were there patrolling the skies of southern Iraq to keep Saddam from launching his MiGs and killing his own people. Basically, we're preventing genocide, which is what he was doing. So we went in there to keep the MiGs on the ground and not let him kill his own people, right?
Yep.
The southern no-fly zone. I was the third crew to go in to do that just after the war ended. So we flew combat sorties 1, 2, or 3 every day. And after I think 25 sorties, the colonel then had the discretion to nominate a crew for an air medal, for air operations.
Hmm.
Because yeah, we got chased by MiGs. AWACS would tell us there's a MiG coming, and then we'd have to retrograde and get out of there. Enemy fire was expected. That's the definition of the O1 sortie, right? Well, guess what happened? Our package went to the Pentagon with 3 other packages. The first 4 crews had flown 37 sorties, something. The package came back in our file. Air medal for this crew, air medal for this crew, air medal for that crew. So 4 medals for each air crew. And we got a letter for our crew that our crew could not receive an air medal because there was a female on the crew.
Wow.
So imagine yourself on a crew
Hmm.
that's already flown the 37 combat sorties. You already did it.
Yeah.
And now you, as a guy, can't get recognized because they put a woman on your plane. So tell me how this helps anybody's morale. I mean, that was so shocking to me. I was like, how did you miss the fact that I'm not supposed to be here? Obviously, you needed me to be here because you trained me and you sent me.
Yes.
And now you just don't want to admit that I did it by actually recognizing the work. And it could have died there. It could have been really sad that we didn't get an air medal. And, my poor 3 guys on my crew also would get, lose. But the colonel's like, this is ridiculous. He appealed it. He sent the package back to the Pentagon, and something like, I don't know, 7 months after we redeployed back home, we finally got our air medals sent to our base, and we had the ceremony, and I got my air medal. And it means a lot to me because of everything I'm telling you. And I have to tell you, the flying happened August of 92. Congress changed the law allowing women to be in combat and combat assignments and combat airplanes in the following year in the spring of 93. So I got this air medal, basically they were deciding at the Pentagon whether or not to give it to
Yeah.
our crew as the law was changing. And so they finally felt safe that they could give it because the law was going to change, right? If the law hadn't changed, I don't think we would have gotten the medal.
Wow.
But I recently confirmed with the Air Force Personnel Center that this whole crazy story I just told you, I'm the first Hispanic female aviator in the Air Force to earn an air medal for combat air operations. I didn't know that. Somebody asked that question, so I asked the question of the Personnel Center. But that's how crazy it was. So I don't know. It was never as much a discrimination as it was what was allowed and wasn't allowed.
This segment is from episode 53, featuring Unena Tassier.
They were posted in Lagos, so that's where I was born. But I grew up in Ibadan because my dad was transferred to although my dad was in Lagos, but he wanted, I guess, Ibadan had more stability, so he wanted us to grow in a very more stable environment. And so I would say we spent our lives in Ibadan. Like, I can't really speak Igbo, so if anyone speaks Igbo to me, I won't even understand anything. But I speak Yoruba and I write Yoruba. And we schooled in Ibadan as well as in Lagos. Um, so yeah, that's a little about me. My first experience with police was one of those days when, you know how in December, everybody travels home.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one of those trips where we were all traveling home, and my dad happened to be driving the car. And I remember we got to this checkpoint somewhere in Ijebu-Ode, and some Nigerian police had, set up the whole blockage thing, and they're like, okay, come out. And my dad had just bought a brand new Mercedes Benz in those days.
Yeah.
So and then they were like, come out of the car, come out of the car. Who are you? And that kind of stuff. And my dad was really upset. My dad, was really upset. Like, why are you cussing? Why are you stopping, me? And why are you cussing? Why are you harassing me and my family, basically? And they were asking my dad where he got the car from, and my dad was like, I'm in Nigeria and I'm working, so I can afford to buy myself a car. And he had not even pulled the whole I'm a custom officer card at that time. So they were still, and then they were like, okay, if you want us to let you go, then you have to settle us. So my dad was really upset. He was like, do you know that I'm a custom officer myself, and I know that you're not supposed to do this. This is an embarrassment to the Nigerian police. We were all scared. We thought maybe they were going to shoot our dad because they had guns and all that. But the moment my dad then told them that I'm an officer like yourself, and I understand that it's December, you guys can ask, I understand that you're checking and all that stuff, but you should not be harassing people this way. And so then they changed the whole thing. So, okay, Oga, find us something for Christmas, settle us for Christmas. And my dad was like, no, that you should ask, basically you should ask nicely. And I think that for me was where I was really worried about the whole thing, where again, I was just a child. So I didn't really know how deep this whole thing was, deeply rooted in the system. And so we moved on and we got to the village. We were all traumatized. And I remember that was the last time that we ever actually traveled home with him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because it was just scary. We didn't want to go anywhere because, why would they be harassing us? Then the next one I'll have with them was when it was the day I was coming to America, my trip to America here. We were from around the Ajawa Estate area. The police had stopped us again. Remember, my parents were both in customs, so this time it was my mom, and my mom went alaye with them. My mom was like, who's speaking? Now they stop like this, who get this speaking, blah blah blah. If she miss her flight, I go make sure I scatter on her. So my dad is the more civil one. My mom is like area scatter. I mean, she grew up in a Ajegunle, so so. But yeah, that was my encounters with Nigerian police. But after that, it's just been we've been here in America, so I haven't really dealt with them.
This segment is from episode 54 with Brenda Zarai Zuniga.
Because I'm a raging extrovert and I love being around people, I love talking to people, it was hard for me at first to not even be able to go out to the grocery store because I get my energy from being around people. And so there was a time in the first couple months of the pandemic where I fell into, I call it my 1 week depression, because I had been working so hard every day as a way to kind of cope with it too. And I decided to take 2 days off. And so I thought, you know what? No, I need to self-care. I'm just going to eat pizza and just take 2 days off. Well, those 2 days off, turned into 3 days, turned into 4 days of still in my pajamas, turned into 5 days. Now I haven't even showered in 5 days, turned into every dish in the kitchen dirty, not washing anything. And just this depression hit where I had no joy. My anxiety was through the roof. I didn't know what to do. I didn't even know where to start, where to begin. And I didn't even know it was that bad until I was FaceTiming with my sister, which I FaceTimed with her once a week. And I remember it was our weekly FaceTime, and I told her, oh my God, look how crazy my hair looks. And I did some like weird hair thing. Like I flipped it to the side. And she goes, yeah, when's the last time you showered? And I genuinely could not answer that question.
Wow.
And I was, oh my God. And I was thinking, and my sister starts teasing me, and she goes, please, you can't even remember, please tell me it was at most 3 days ago. She goes, please. And I looked at her and I just went, Gabs, I'm sorry. Like, no, it was longer than 3 days ago. I don't remember. And she's like, oh my gosh, when's the last time you changed out of your pajamas? And I just went, I don't know. Oh my God. And it was my sister who's 13 giving me that mirror back of, hey, this is what I'm seeing. I don't know if you are, but this is what I'm seeing. And so when she said that, after we hung up, I immediately took a shower, and it wasn't easy. It was hot, like taking that, like my arms felt so heavy. I was like, oh, I don't want to wash my hair. I go into my kitchen and I was like, oh my God, every dish is dirty. How did I let this happen? But I remembered to be so kind to myself in that moment. And I called a crisis hotline. And because my therapist was, I remember I called a crisis hotline and I said, hey, I did not realize that I'm going through a depression right now. And I need someone to talk to about this. And so they helped, and they were telling me like baby steps, like, okay, great, you showered, that's great. Now, try and do your dishes, and then baby steps, tomorrow, do something more around the house, get a little active, go outside, go in and get some sun. And so they helped me. And once I got that groove, I was able to get myself back. But even me being a mental health activist, someone who's worked on her mental health since she was a teenager, and who has her own mindfulness coaching company, I'm still human, and this pandemic still affected me, in the way where I fell into a week-long depression, didn't even realize,
Yeah.
And it's so important. Without my sister mirroring that back to me, I don't know how long that would have happened.
This segment is from episode 58, featuring Natalie Biasnil.
Africa has so many tribes,
Oh, yeah.
and I think we want to break it into colonial times. All these names and all these dialects and all these
It's a lot.
religions that we
It's
have.
a lot.
It becomes a little tedious. So Njamena, the N is silent. It's just
okay.
like you in your country, you have some names that start with the letter N,
Yes.
and it's silent, right?
So that's true.
Oh yeah.
That's
Yeah,
true.
and you said my last name right, Beasnael,
Biasnael,
So
which is a
yeah,
beautiful
it has a
name.
meaning.
Yes.
Thank you.
So you were born in Jamena, and you're the first person that I've ever talked to that was born in that city. So can you please introduce myself and the audience to your place of birth, and just tell us a little bit about there?
About Njamena.
Yeah.
Well, I come from a country that is vastly the Sahara Desert. And Njamena, for the longest, has been dubbed the capital. And during colonial times, it was called Fort Lamy. As you know, French was colonized by the French.
Yes.
I say French was colonized. Chad was colonized
Chad,
by the
yeah,
French.
by the French, yeah.
And we have two official languages, which are Arabic and French.
Oh, okay.
If I want to describe N'Djamena to you, it's mostly the desert. I think we have so many buildings now, and there's not too much highlight on some of the most beautiful architectural work that we have there. But because of the Arab influence, some of the buildings look like buildings that you would find somehow in Dubai or North Africa, the more northern African countries like Libya, Tunisia, and some of the rest. If I should describe Chad or N'Djamena in one word, I would say it's almost like an excursion between going, if you live here in America, going to Arizona, maybe New Mexico, with a mixture of the heat that you get from Texas, from Dallas.
Oh, interesting.
And it gets a little windy too. It gets a little windy. So, you see a lot of people covering up in Chad. I know the last time that I went, even my sunglasses were melting. So it was that hot. But I think there's a special remedy to where I come from. The people there are a little bit more humble than needed. You can never be too humble, but the humility is what strikes me whenever I land in Chad. And sometimes it's, I'm talking about the people right now. Sometimes it's mistaken for weakness. And
I
that
understand.
would be the city in one word. You can't talk about a city without its people. And that's, where I come from.
That's right. This segment is from episode 59, featuring Mensima Shabazz, PhD. So, last year there was a story that caught my eye from the Ghanaian, from news coming from Ghana, when a few prominent women made public that they were sexually assaulted and molested while they were very young, and it led to a lot of discussion online. And people, this was around when the Ghanaian government was talking about introducing sex education in the school curriculums. I think it was primary schools that they wanted to do that with. And all of a sudden, there was disinformation and disinformation attacks. Religious institutions jumped in with the wrong information, of course, and leading to the government government claiming that they've postponed the decision, but they didn't say it was cancelled. But I was fascinated that a lot of prominent Ghanaian women spoke up, made public that this had happened to them, and it was similar to what I'd read in your book. And from what I'm familiar with, also in Nigeria, it wasn't like a surprise to me, knowing what I know from just what I know. It's not a surprise, because I also know when something like this became popular. Also, not popular, but when a lot of people made it public in Nigeria and other African countries, and it was being discussed, it had a similar reaction. But the only difference was that there was no sex education talk. So, do you think it was a missed opportunity for Ghana not to go forward with the introduction of sex education in schools?
I think it's a missed opportunity. Every time we cover up violence against women, because if we were to flip the coin and imagine the government hearing that women were, assaulting young men, what would they have done? They wouldn't have tabled it. They would have put out a message out to say, these women are doing X, Y, and Z, and it's horrifying, et cetera, et cetera. When we flip the tables, the women always, young girls, it have to be silent until we give you permission to talk,
Mm-hmm.
or until, I mean, where would you go? Who would solve that problem, right? Sex education is important. In my own experience, one of the things that struck me was that because in our home, it wasn't within my frame of reference that people could be violent in that manner.
Yes.
I never was prepared for it. Right. If somebody invited me to his home, especially when my parents and my family had said entrusted me to his care,
Mm-hmm.
I expected that he would care for me the way my family would care for anybody in our home. But because of the void in explaining these situations in schools to girls, we almost walk in blind into these situations. You don't see it coming, right?
Exactly.
It's just right in front of you, and you don't have any recourse. And I think it's horrifying.
It is.
That I think the government missed an opportunity to do the right thing. And I always say this in most of my teachings is when we are beginning to uh, address issues in our society. And this one says, oh, but we have to wait because of this, or we can't do it because of this. The question is it right or wrong?
Mm.
Is it right or wrong that men are able to do this to young girls? If your answer is no, then you approach it a different way. But we know what the true real answer is.
Mm-hmm.
It is wrong.
Yes.
Take the steps to correct it.
This segment is from episode 63, featuring Ness Rain. So, since getting out, have you still been? Are you still in the industry, or did you just take a break?
Well, what happened then is I got uh I wasn't on an exhibition. I ended up on a different kind of audition. It
Mm-hmm.
was for MTV as a host, and I went there and it was cool and everything. They liked me, and I went to a different audition again for hosting for TV because it was like, oh wow, I can actually do this and talk and get paid for talking
Yep.
and connect with people and communicate is something I love to do because, as I said earlier, I was into journalism anyways. So one audition, they liked me, they offered me a job, but I had to move somewhere I didn't want to move. And so yes, then I started creating basically demo videos and sending them out to different TV stations all over and to people that I had met previously through the music. And at some point, I was contacted, and I always was like doing basically like interviewing celebrities for different TV stations, radio stations, sometimes a magazine as well in the UK.
Mm.
And that's how basically I built my portfolio and I got my name out there.
Oh, that's cool. So,
And then I went back to music and then I got screwed over again.
oh,
And then I decided to do the independent thing. And 3 years ago, I quit music for good as an artist.
this segment is from episode 65 with Desiree Peterkin Bell. When did you begin to identify with the purpose of the part that you now see yourself on?
I, so for me, and I tell young people this all the time, I do a lot of speeches, and I talk to lots of young people who often find themselves in the midst of making some major life decisions. And so for me, I had a quarter life crisis, which really does exist.
Mm-hmm.
So I was the first person in my family to graduate college, to go to grad school. I had gotten accepted to law school. And so I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, and spent almost a year working at one of the biggest law firms in the world, in the country, in New York City in Times Square. And I was working on a U.S. tobacco case, and I was working on another case that was very well known at the time, Christie's and Sotheby's price fixing case. Essentially, rich people stealing from other rich people, which I just did not get because I didn't come up with money. So I didn't understand that part. But whatever. And I remember sitting across from a woman who had visible effects of smoking. And she was a woman who was a Black woman. And I was on the other side of the table. And she was looking at me as if I didn't belong, or if I, like I was on the wrong team. And I felt like crap. And I went home that night, and I cried to my mother, and I told my mother, even though I'm making all this money and this is a great big law firm and all that great stuff,
Yeah.
that I just wasn't happy. I didn't feel like I was fulfilling my purpose. And she said to me, we do what makes you happy, and then everything else will fall into place. And so I walked out of the law firm, and I did what most people don't do, which is I went back and got a master's in public policy and began my official journey into government. I wanted to understand this thing called government, and how it was supposed to communicate with its people, what its role and responsibility was to its constituents, how public policy can help to shape people's lives, and then how you can advocate from the inside, not only from the
From the
outside.
outside, yeah.
And so that is essentially what helped to define my career, and that's what I'm doing right now. But now I'm on the outside, which is even more exciting.
And the last but not the least, you may remember this quote from the last compilation that we gave you back in January from Verena Tuna in episode 50.
I think my shirt today says it all. Don't be a lady, be a legend.
And why is that?
Well, the whole idea of being a lady is overrated. And it's much better to be a legend.
I'm not in disagreement, but that wasn't the answer I was expecting.
No, but also, like, in light of current events, Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away yesterday.
The
right?
notorious RBG.
Yes.
Rest in power.
And so that was a little bit of shock to the system. I didn't expect to be so emotionally impacted by it.
Yeah.
But she is definitely one of those people who did not worry about being a lady and became a legend. She did not worry about upsetting people with her stance on equality, even in her early parts of her career, where she argued in front of the Supreme Court. I believe it was the Supreme Court of all men, and got them to agree to her point on equality. She did not worry about how that got perceived, and how that was reflected on her as a woman. And she fought for equality through the entirety of her career, and therefore became a legend.
Perfect.